Hey, everybody. Welcome to the Improv Network podcast. This is a series of longer conversations about improv topics. And I'm James Quesada.
And I'm Julia Schroeder.
And Julia is joining both as a guest and a sub-in co-host as Bob, with his work schedule, not able to join us for this Sunday. Excuse the sirens if you hear them in the background. I usually have to say that when I'm in New York, but we are currently in Portland and Maine, which is a fun opportunity for Julia and I to record/stream together on the road on the same couch.
We wanted to make it feel like we were still in New York. So we said, hey, get an ambulance going through here a couple times.
Yeah.
Let them know we haven't changed.
Yeah, we're still the same old New York siren people that we always were. But this conversation is going to be about podcasting. Julia and I both have experience on a podcast. Obviously, this one, Julia has co-hosted with us before in the past, and she has also just recently started a new podcast of her own, which is called She's Good, and we will tell you a little bit about that in just a moment. But how many episodes deep are you?
We're releasing number 18 tomorrow.
Yeah, so up and running for sure, but and still early enough to remember what it was like to start it.
Yeah.
And we also used to do the $1.50 social club together, which is it's like a 5 or 6 person conversation, that more comedy, less sort of informational, educational commentary.
Less drama.
So anyway, we've got a couple of experiences with podcasting, and we want to talk about how they relate to improv skills, what sorts of improv skills benefit you when you're podcasting, whether you're hosting or as a guest. And we'll also talk about some of the nitty-gritty things about podcasting separately from how they relate to improv, just because I feel like podcasting is a big thing to be interested in or consider. And for anybody who might tune in to hear about those things, we'll also talk about some of the things that you might not think about up front if you're considering starting a podcast. So anyway, that's what's on the agenda. Julia, how are you?
Good. Do I have to do an intro too now?
Yeah, now take the reins for a second. I should also say while we're getting started, we have a couple viewers and hello viewers, whoever you are. We are recording just on the laptop in our Airbnb here. So let us know that you can hear us, or if you can't.
Give a comment, even if it's a thumbs up. Do whatever. We don't know if there is Wi-Fi in Portland, actually. We assume.
But in fact, I'll make a quick comment here, just in case, because if you can't hear us, if you couldn't hear us, how would you know that we're asking for you to let us know?
Yes, I saw a thumbs up. Here, James, I'll take it from here.
Please.
While you comment. Everybody, we are talking about podcasting today. If you're just joining us or if you've already been listening. First of all, I want to say real quick, hi, I'm Julia. The reason I'm honored to be here today is because, I love James in more ways than one, and I think he's great. Hey, Melanie!
Yeah,
thanks you
Mel.
So much. Hi, Mel.
All right, thanks, Mel. So getting started with the conversation, I told you we're going to sit down, and I wanted to hopefully talk about podcasting, and that seemed like a really exciting topic to you. What was the first thing that popped out in your mind for the conversation? Thank you, Heather.
Thanks, Heather. I think it's important there's so many people have a podcast. I think when we started, there was a lot that I was like, you just sit down and you talk and blah, blah, blah. And it is so much more than that. But I, for one, love. So there's a lot to talk about. One,
Yeah,
that was one of the first things that popped out to me. Two is I love podcasting. I love listening to podcasts. I love doing them. I love being a guest on other people's. And I love being on them in general. I just think they're so fun. So yeah, I'm a fan of podcasts, which is part of the reason why I got excited, I think.
cool. And then so your show is called She's Good. And can you just tell us a little bit about the format, just so we have an idea of like what type of podcast you're doing for context?
Yeah, totally. So it's three. We're three friends. The three of us. It's me, Katie McGraw, and Mary Beth Kolbix, and we're all originally from the Detroit improv scene, which is where we met. And now, of course, I'm in New York. They're in Detroit now, and we all, over the summer of 2020, kind of found our mutual interest in women's sports. And we started watching women's sports, and we started supporting women's sports together. And we were in a text thread about it, and we were like, oh, what if we just started a podcast about it? So the podcast, She's Good, is us learning about, because we're still new. I've played sports all my life, but new to supporting, consistently supporting women's sports. So we kind of talk about things we've learned and things like a general public might want to know if they are just trying to tune in and generally support women's sports but don't have the time to watch every game, and neither do we, and whatever. So yeah, some of it is news, some of it is talking about a specific game and our reactions to that game. Some of it we've had a couple guests on, and some of it is like complete tangents, and it's, of course, we're improvisers, so it's like we like to think it's entertaining.
Yeah, so I guess my curiosity is, with the three of you as improvisers and good buddies before this, like, what are the pros and cons of having a group of improvisers do a conversational podcast? Like, did you try to give structure right away, or did you kind of have to rein things in because you're all doing bits? Like, I feel like not to belabor the question, but
no, I hear the question.
Improvisers can either be really great to have a free-form conversation with, because we're all used to like yes-anding and going with the flow and having good energy, but there's also the trade-off of it's like wrangling in squirrels in a bit parade.
Totally. I think if you put improvisers in a room and say, okay, just do a podcast about anything, they will get hours of content of just bits or whatever. And I don't think it's hard to like find content. I think finding your like what the podcast is about might be a little bit harder. But anyway, yeah, for us, it is absolutely the double-edged sword of like, okay, one, yeah, it's very easy to like chat with each other, and I think, yeah, improvisers know how to yes and have a conversation. I think for us, we have a little bit of an obligation to deliver info. So I think definitely at the beginning, I at least prefer to just like, well, let's see what happens. And that's true improviser energy, I think. And I think it can, you might miss some of the things that might make a podcast a little bit easier to follow and a little bit more structured. So we end up kind of going back and forth each episode now as we've gotten in the rhythm of things of like, okay, we've got our different topics we want to talk about today and things we want to hit. And sometimes we'll be a little bit more structured about it. Like, okay, we know we want to hit the women's national soccer team had a couple games that they played this past week. We know we want to talk about those. And, maybe in the text thread, we've like mentioned a couple things that we want to like touch on, but nothing is like we some episodes we've had like fully outlined stuff of like, this is the flow it should go at. But no matter what, I mean, it's inevitable for us to just kind of like find the fun as well and go off topic. And the thing I love about being an improviser doing this is like, we can throw the outline out the window if we want, if something else feels more interesting. Like, quick example, the podcast or the episode that we're releasing tomorrow, which is February 1st for anyone watching this later and really wants to know our timeline.
What do you mean by tomorrow?
Well, I'm getting out of this podcast. I don't know when it was. We spent like 10 minutes talking about Gilmore Girls. Nothing about women's sports. And that is something we even like wrote in our bios. Like, we talk about women's sports, learning about women's sports, supporting women's sports, and Hey Arnold references. So, like, you know what you're getting when you listen to this. It's not ESPN.
Yeah. Well, I think that's great, first of all, just like the mix of accessibility, because this is sort of aside from the improv question, but like I like that I love the idea of a podcast that brings you into the conversation as the people who are doing the podcast learn about something.
Yeah.
Because sometimes it's hard to jump in like midstream to a dense topic and just try to catch up. Like you basically, if you're doing that, you're just like looking for clues to go like research in between episodes.
Totally.
Whereas like for something like your show or I don't know, I've seen like documentaries where like the goal is like, I don't know much about this and I'm going to find out. And I like being taken along from the same place of like knowing less about a specific topic, but I don't have to have specific knowledge to learn about it. That's for me, my favorite way to learn about things.
Yes. Yep. Totally.
And then, so first of all, we'll pause to bring up Mel's question, which it seems like we're right on track because Mel asks about.
I thought you kind of took her question and sort of.
I didn't. It's a happy coincidence, but Mel's asking exactly what we're talking about, which is whether being an improviser helps you as a podcaster, whether or not it's a podcast, an improv podcast. And as we're talking, if anyone else has questions or comments on the conversation, we would love to make this an interactive thing. That's why we do it live and through the Improv Network. So bring them on if you got them while we're talking.
Nothing's off the table.
Yeah, we just said we're willing to deviate.
You want to know a recipe for brioche bread? Ask it.
But so on that note though, about like the preparation and being willing to like go in different directions or throw away the plan, I think that's definitely relevant, obviously, to improv.
Yeah.
And then what is I'll speak from my experience, is that I have a really hard time finding the balance between over planning and under planning. Yeah. Sometimes if we have a particular guest or if we're talking about a particular topic, I will decide to or consider making more of notes. I did it for this episode, actually. I made notes on the podcasting thing because I think it's easy to get in the weeds about it.
Yeah.
And because you and I are so familiar with each other that it might be good to kind of like stay on a thing or whatever. But for other reasons too, I'll think about taking notes. And sometimes it's really helpful, and I'm glad that I did it. Sometimes I get in my head and it makes the conversation unnatural. Yeah. And like, so how do you kind of like mitigate that as a group when you plan or as you get into the conversation and everything?
You know, I think the three of us have found how we work together at this point. And I think we all add something different. And I think this is true for any podcast, where I think for some podcasts, there might be someone who plays that role that you just, often it's you for any podcast that you hear. Like someone who has to sort of make sure it stays on track or whatever. And knows, okay, we've been listening to, James is a big fan of The Dollop, so am I. We've been listening to it. I like to think of two very good examples of these things there's Gareth Reynolds and there's Dave Anthony. Dave Anthony is the one reading the story, and Gareth is the one, I don't know anything about the story. I'm going to just improvise off of the story. This is the first time I'm hearing the story. Obviously, that's very reduced, but like, I think for any podcast, you might have those roles where like, okay, well, we have to keep driving on, and these people might be doing bits, and we let the bits go on as long as like they're fun or whatever, and then we have to like continue going. Now for She's Good in particular, I know that like maybe I rely on this too much, but I've sort of found that like I'll kind of be doing the introduction. I know that overall kind of like structure stuff of like intro and outro, and is what we're talking about today or whatever. And I know that Katie and Mary Beth might know a few more details. Katie especially is like knows all the info. I feel she knows it. She knows all the stuff. So if I bring up a topic and I go, oh man, I saw this article about like the WNBA was like doing something or other, that was interesting. I know that if I bring that up, at the very least, Katie and Mary Beth will be like, oh yeah, and this is why this happened or whatever. So that's very helpful to me, for sure, to have someone who I know can like, if you know that your other people are going to be like, oh, what was that article about? Then I think I know I need to do a little bit more prep. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So one thing I hear is that it's helpful to have a host. Obviously, that's commonplace for podcasts. But maybe, it seems obvious, but maybe we take for granted like why it's important to have a host, and like how you can kind of take advantage of the host position.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's a great thought to like know. Okay, for like She's Good, or when we were doing Buck 50, like I think that I'm a good facilitator, so I'll kind of like comment, but also like direct things. And it sounds like that's kind of what you're doing too, is like setting up for Katie and Mary Beth, like.
Mm-hmm.
Based on what you know that they know, or what you know that they don't, you're like kind of throwing that at them, or picking up the thread if they need a hand or whatever. So.
Yes. Okay. I think it's just actually, now to really answer your question, now that I've thought about it and you've brought back the context, I think it really is similar to like an improv show where there's like you have a full show dynamic or whatever. You do have to have like that vision of like, okay, I think it's time to move on from this topic. It's time to edit this scene. It might be time to, you have a random bit going on, whether it's in a show or a podcast. It is very helpful to know when that is going on long enough. I think it's hard to know if you're thinking about it like, oh, for a listener, is this going to be like too much? Are we spending too much time on this part? Are we spending too much time on this random tangent? Are we doing this or that? I think the answer to that is what's fun for the group. I genuinely think if the group is having fun doing this bit, or talking about this article, or talking about whatever it might be, it's okay to sacrifice the outline for like what's fun for the group. I am of the belief, if you are listening to people talk about something that they're passionate about, or that they're having fun talking about, or if it's in an improv show playing, then it's going to be interesting for the audience. Because at the same time, like, podcasts are about the personalities of the podcasters too. If you get to see how people like talk and interact with each other, I think that's part of podcasting, topic aside. Yeah,
that is great. Okay, that brings up I want to put a pin in this because we have a couple different directions to go here. But naming your group to set the expectation, like She's Good lightly implies it's easy to draw the connection of how you have the sports theme there, and then in your description, letting people know that like you'll talk about sports, but you're doing it from a place of learning yourselves, and that you are definitely going to go on tangents. I think really when you're saying that, like, well, as a listener, are they talking too much or too little about something? Goes a long way. And then ultimately, if you've set the expectation that like we generally are on this, but we also do this, like you're giving yourself license to just like be what you are as a podcast, and or what you want to be. And then you can kind of be like, okay, well, are we breaking our promise in to the audience.
True.
And so then yeah, like the most important thing is that you are having fun as a group of friends, and getting some sports in there, but like you don't want or need to build the audience of people who are like, I came here to get my like weekly update
exactly.
on like
no
what happened in the sports world. They want to have some of that as the anchor point, and then mostly listen to you having fun.
Yes, totally. And I also think if that is something that you're like, I have no idea what's interesting to our audience. I think if I were to do a survey, I think that's where, like, if you get feedback from your audience on like, oh, I loved when you had a little bit more of a flow, like you knew what you were talking about. Okay, let's move on to this now. Or I loved when you guys just kind of like, you haven't seen each other in a while and you're just like talking about all this stuff. If you have people to tell you those things, I think that's ideal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that is tough with podcasting or the digital web series. Anything is like unlike improv, you don't get that immediate feedback.
We very much do it for ourselves, and our moms just go, this is nice. I really love this. Yeah.
It's nice to hear you talk with each other.
I didn't listen to the whole thing. I didn't get that part, I think.
So the other thing that I wanted to just touch on, because it made me think specifically of connections between podcasting as a host and improv, is that a host will also, like, if you're hosting, let's say short form, that you can kind of like. So we do a show where we take audience suggestions on slips of paper, and do like a Who's Line sort of game show, and I know that the hosts, knowing who's on stage, if they get a suggestion of like a celebrity or a genre that they know somebody on stage has a wheelhouse for, then they will set that aside to be like, okay, if we play a replay game or a character impersonation type game, they know who to throw it to make look good. Pete most recently during the snow day when I played with Hugs and Pull-Ups, was he was doing the press conference thing, and he was labeling everybody as like the press people, because for that game you're usually like, oh, I have a bit that I'll just be like, I'm Jim Jimerson and I'm from the Jimmy News, like Pete was beating everybody to the punch, and for me he goes yes, Dracula from New York, because he knows that I can do a fun Dracula voice, and so that's what came to mind when you were saying that, is that like Pete knows that, and even as like the kind of faux facilitator of that guessing game, he was like throwing things at people that he knew would be a fun challenge / twist, but also things that he knew that we could do because he knows our strengths.
Yes. Yeah, totally.
Awesome. So, and then Luke. Hi, Luke. Luke from the other Portland. Luke, I don't know if you caught the beginning of this, but we're in Portland, Maine, and which is amazing. Yes, we are in Portland, Maine. I thought you were saying that, like, Luke, I don't know if you know this. Luke, I saw you comment that, Luke, hey, I'm in Portland too, which we know. We're not in your neighborhood, Luke. No. My fault for having poor cadence, but no, that was me interpreting more than. Let me restart. Okay. Luke, I don't know if you know this, but we're in Portland, Maine. Okay, now let me try. Luke, I don't know if you know this. I saw your comment. We're actually in Portland, Maine, not your Portland. So right? Yeah. We're gonna get to Luke's question, but and then Mel has a different one too. But we'll get to that. Oh yeah. Okay. So a couple things. Also, hi Luke. It's so good to see you on this note. Me as a host, we'll talk about hosting for just another beat. I think that I'm good at facilitating. I don't always think that I'm good at like keeping things like the ice breaking and keeping things like fun and playful. So I appreciate so much having a co-host like you or like Bob, people who like keep me grounded and kind of can like poke at my my unconscious.
Someone to call you out. Yes, I appreciate that too.
Yeah.
When there's so much stress to like, okay, all right, this is what I need to do. If there's someone who's like, it's keeping it light, but specifically being able to like call you out on, because an audience might be also thinking the same thing.
Yes. Because you're unconscious with podcasting, it becomes like a insular conversation, and you kind of lose the self-image a little bit because you're just wrapped up in the conversation, and so those unconscious habits creep their way back in more so than they would while you're like on stage,
totally,
and being performative in front of an audience. Whether you're doing improv or like a live podcast in front of an audience, I think it's easy to become unconscious.
Okay, but you also will get not mad at me, but for when we were doing Buck 50, you would say too many bits, Julia, stop chiming in with all this bull crap.
No, because you would do things like sing songs to yourself.
There's a song for everything. Under my breath.
You would climb on top of
Here's
the mic
the main
and
thing.
start
Look, guys,
singing.
if you're thinking about starting a podcast, if a song comes to your mind and you really want to chime in with it, do it fully out onto the mic. Don't hold it in, because it won't sound the way you think it sounds if you're trying to be like under your breath, like, oops, I did it. Because everyone else is talking. Just do the full bit.
And on that note, it is good to have just like knowing the strengths of the other people that you're podcasting with. It's also good to be conscious of where your weaknesses are, for lack of a better term. Always trying to keep it positive, but just knowing how you complement each other as podcasting hosts or whatever is like. I think that's a nice thing too, and applies to improv, where you're like trying to put together a team of like, this person's a really great grounded, straight character. Mm-hmm. This person really shoots from the hip and is more impulsive, and putting together a team that can balance and complement each other really well. I think that applies for conversational podcasts too.
Yeah. Totally.
Look, we're gonna get back to Luke's question.
Wait.
He says LOL exclamation point. So
that's good. Saved
it there.
He laughed out loud.
He did miss that we were in Portland, and he appreciates the clarity. So cool. We did a good thing. Okay, so Luke's initial question was, for your podcast, how much do you cut down or find in post? Mm-hmm. I know some shows record for 4 hours for an hour of content and then cut it down. Others just balance levels and send it out. That's a great question.
Great question.
And in terms of editing, I think we'll find a lot here to talk about with like improv and sketch. But we'll throw it to you first, because I know that this is the first podcast that you have been doing all the editing for. Yeah. And what has it been like starting to do that? And like, what have you learned in the first 18 episodes of editing?
So I will say, when we first started the podcast, we were like not really sure what it was going to be like. So we were like, all right, these are the things we want to hit. Let's just try it. And, I'll go back and edit things out or whatever. So throughout the recording process, we would be like, okay, so that was good. Do you guys want to talk about, I don't know, like the lacrosse game that just happened? I don't think we've ever talked about lacrosse, but, and then we would go, okay, great. And then we would go, so there's also
you would actually stop the conversation, not stop recording, and then be like off the record or whatever.
Yeah, not always, but if it felt like, we need to like direct order. So when I would go back and edit, we record in Zoom. So I would be editing this in Final Cut, and it took forever. It took forever because in Final Cut, like when you have an hour plus, of content, you got to wait for it to download a proxy. If Luke, I'm sure you know what I'm talking about, but for anyone, like, you got to get, if it's up, it just like takes forever to even like cut things out and like listen to it. And it's just like, it's absolute hell to try and edit a podcast that's over an hour. So James recommended that we just, hey, either do it live or record it as if it's live, like you will not edit anything out of the content when you're actually doing the editing. It'll simply be audio editing. Yeah, totally. And that's helped us so much. It kept we record as if we are sending it out in that moment. It is live. People are watching us do this, so that we don't have to like cut out that stuff. And what it does is keep the energy way up, because we know we can't be like, oh man, okay, we'll edit this out, but what do you guys think? Last thing on it that relates to improv is like, improvisers know how to carry a conversation or push through a conversation. If there's mistakes, the whole thing of improv is like using those mistakes or moving past them or finding a way to like, transition or get to the next scene, get to the next like piece of the game or whatever it is. It's the same thing in any conversation, especially a podcast, where like, if something goes weird, if someone says something weird, or like your first thought is to edit that out, like make it work in some way. It's going to probably be one of the most relatable parts of the podcast episode.
Yes. That is, I think, the best advice at the end of the day is treat it like it's live, especially if you are an improviser, and especially if you're working with other improv type people, whether or not they're actually improvisers. If they are good, like yes-anding conversationalists, like just do your best to treat it. I think that's the benefit of improv is that like you can pivot and keep the ball rolling, and then you have less editing to do, and the better you can do it in the first take, the better off you are for the overall quality. Mm-hmm. And having those vulnerable moments, which again are part of what makes improv great, is when you have made an error or a misstep or a contradiction, or you're in a sticky situation and you do something to pivot out of it. Like that's part of the vulnerability and the benefit of doing improv. And if you treat your conversations that way, you'll have the same impact.
Yes.
And save yourself
totally
the editing time.
And by the way, that advice has helped me in self-tapes. It's helped me in like character bits. It's helped me in things just to push through. Like so often I'll be like, trying to do a self-tape or a take or whatever, and be like, my name's Karen, and I hated that. And you watch it back and it's like, wait, that was going to be the best one. That was about to be the best one. And then I just cut it off because I thought it wasn't going to be good enough. Whereas if I just kept going with like, my name's Karen, and I don't know, I guess I like potatoes. And it's like, wait, that's great. Is that a good example?
Yeah. Yeah, no, I 100% agree. I think that there's a little bit to be said about the other end of things, which maybe applies more to crafted content, like not just organic conversational stuff.
There was a second part to Luke's question, was his examples. So keep going.
Wait, what was the example?
Well, his examples were like, some people record for 4 hours and then cut it down.
Okay, so I think that it's definitely different if you're doing something a little bit more crafted, like an informational something that is a particular, like, okay, we're going to do something a little bit more like scripted, or like almost like news interview segments, if anybody's doing something like that, or especially like narrative stuff. What we did with the Buck50 Social Club, we ended up doing some sketch comedy, audio sketch comedy. And one of the things that we learned from doing those is, or especially editing, is that I like to have the main take, but then when you get to play around with different takes in rehearsal sessions or recording sessions, and get people to just play around with it, then when I go to piece together the lines of dialogue, I find that is like, easier for me to fake the naturalness of it. Like, I think that actors a lot of the time with these audio sketches, in my experience, like really want to riff off of each other and act off of each other. And I think that is absolutely understandable and generally preferred. But I think learning to improvise and do a bunch of like options on lines is super valuable in the edit. I'd rather have much more content than I need to whittle down for like a 2-minute sketch. In that case, because we were improvising and going off script, and then similar, but kind of conversely, is that sometimes we would do a table read and we would record the table read, and at least on our first album, there were lines of dialogue for the sketches that I loved so much from the table read, again, because we're working with a lot of improvisers, that ended up in the final cut, even though we had a bunch of options, because it was so good the first time out, acting on impulse, than it was, trying to do something more calculated after the fact. So that I just wanted to throw that out there as like, depending on what you're working on, you might want a lot more content than you need.
Yeah.
Organic conversation, you probably want to just shoot to do it for the time length that you're going for, and cut out as little as you need to. Like,
yeah, 100%. And then, the other example I think of, like 4-hour podcasts, I think about like the interview type podcasts, like Pete Holmes will go for a long time, or maybe Mark Maron. I don't mind those, listening to them. If that is like your deal right off the bat when you're first starting a podcast, I would maybe. I'm conflicted on this. If that's your vibe, where like you want to go for 4 hours, I say go for 4 hours and don't worry about cutting that down. But either split them up into parts, or just like do it. It's just, I think that's hard to build an audience if you are going to do 4-hour podcasts. I know that wasn't your question, but I genuinely think that like it's easier just to like have that conversation as much as like you're interested in having it, and then like release it. Now, if you are going to edit that down, I would say don't edit it on Final Cut. Only edit the audio on Logic, and just release the full 4-hour thing on YouTube if you want to.
So you're saying don't, so edit what the audio will be. Don't bother with the video. Just like release the video.
Release the video unedited, full freaking content. And audio, if you want to cut that down.
Have you done that with episodes where you do like?
No, you recommended it at one point, but that's absolutely not worth it for us. We keep everything to at least to like an hour and change.
Yeah. Well, wait. Have you done it before where you've made audio edits that you didn't bother with in the video? You have not done that.
Probably.
I think if it's only a little bit longer, then. I think I don't remember giving that advice. I think
because here's a little bit of background podcast stuff. Look, if you're thinking about starting a podcast, don't. Just kidding. Do. I think it's so worth it. It's just there is a lot more to know. But you have to know. Okay, how are you recording? What mode are you recording on? How are you going to edit it? What tools are you going to use to edit it? How are you releasing it? Like what software are you using to release your podcast on? There's questions like these. Now, we record for an hour on Zoom. We decided that we wanted to release the videos because I use a green screen and sometimes the pictures are fun. That's mostly what it is. And if we already have it on Zoom, if we already have a video, we might as well put it on YouTube. Maybe someone will come across it by searching. I don't really understand SEO, so maybe someone else will be better at that. But I end up just taking the audio that I've edited, compressor, all those things, editing the audio in that way in Final Cut, and then just taking that audio, putting it into Logic, and then uploading it into the world. The audio from Zoom is not as good as if you were to, I don't know, use like an actual like audio recording thing while you're recording. We tried that. We tried to do that, like record the audio on a streaming, like on an internet thing. We tried that to do that separately, where I could just take that, put that in Logic so the audio is like a little bit better in podcast form. But it never worked for us. It was always like weirdly scratchy and whatever. So I end up just taking the audio that I've edited on Final Cut and doing it that way. Pro is it's easier. I've already edited it and we just do it. Con is it's not worth it to do like little intricate edits or anything.
Yeah,
and
it's harder to edit individual. Like if one person has a problem with their audio, it's harder to do it that way. And ultimately it doesn't sound as clean and robust. But yeah. I have found, especially in the past year during the pandemic, when everybody's hopping on Zoom and StreamYard and remote recording in general, that audiences are more forgiving about the there was like a rising standard in audio quality for podcasts, because like all of a sudden your podcast is competing with like Marvel Studios and like Alec Baldwin.
I mean, we could talk about marketing after this.
And so the audio was really starting to become competitive, where like even the rookies needed to know what they're doing for the best audio. I think now it's a little bit rebalanced to be like, do what you can, and don't overthink the pristine quality, unless that's and this kind of goes hand in hand with what you were saying, Julia, is that it is a lot of time to get it edited the way you exactly want to. And if you're going to go through all that, if you specifically want to build the skills for it, then great. I think do it for as long as you're learning skills that are useful and interesting to you. And if your goal is to have like your show be your baby and try to work up to like benchmarks to get sponsorship or, commercial, get pay and monetize it, is the word I'm looking for. Then yeah, I just understand how much work it is and love what you're doing enough to do the work and set aside other stuff. It's really hard to do all that work if it's kind of like a side project and not like your main thing. So, I think we're getting heckled. So Moody says, who got their black watch first? Hey, Chris. These look very similar on the stream from a distance. There could not be a larger gap between this $15 digital watch and Julia's smartwatch, which I think she got first, and I got this one more recently because
this for like 2.5 years.
Really? I have mine. I usually have mine for about 2 years, and the benefit for me having a $15 watch is that every couple of years something on it breaks. The battery, the wrist band. You break your wrist. I break my wrist, and I have to use a pocket watch for a while. But no, I'll just get a new one. And then and then Luke asks if I got the cable knit sweater before or after we went to Maine, which I did. I'll tell you this, Luke. I did bring this because I was like, there's no way I'm going to Maine and not wearing this sweater. But Julia actually got this for me for my birthday back in October. So I haven't had a chance to wear it in an appropriate state. This is not a New York City cable knit sweater.
It's cold here. It's cold, definitely.
And then one last heckle from Moody, who's wondering why why is there a pillow on one side of the couch and not the other?
Great question.
Is James sitting on it to make him taller? It's actually behind me. It's back support, Moody.
And weirdly, I'm sitting on like 5 pillows to get this tall, plus this. There it is.
Proof.
Yeah, it really messes with the feng shui that there's only this one here. But what are you gonna do?
I love. This is so great. This has made my day, honestly, to be able to do this on the road in Maine and hear from friends everywhere.
Mel's question.
Yes.
No,
wait.
The one after that. We already answered that.
I mean,
we'll answer it again if she wants us to, but
I just moved the cursor and clicked. I clicked on the wrong thing.
Jesus.
Okay, what do you find makes an episode stand out to you as an extra great episode? That is an awesome question. And I think also, okay, so this might be a weird way to frame it because thinking about like the time length, people have asked about like how long should an episode be? How long should a show be? And it goes along with this question of like editing too, where people have given feedback. Julie's got to go to the bathroom.
But I'm listening.
So I'll set this up while she's gone by saying that sometimes on any given project, I might get the feedback because I like to do long form content. And people will sometimes say like, well, you know, I think it could be cut down a little bit, or like might be neat if it's shorter. And it's an odd question to me or a critique to me because time just doesn't seem to be have a quality element to it. Like it doesn't seem like a qualitative thing. So I'm like, okay, what is the real thing behind that? And the interpretation when people are like, it'd be nice if it was shorter, is that like it wasn't as strong as it could be for as long. It wasn't good enough to be as long as it was, is really what people are saying. And I think that has to do with the way that you edit, and also the energy that you have while you're doing the show. And I think in terms of Mel's question of like what makes a great episode, I think that it's important to think about like, okay, whatever length of episode or show you want to do, what sorts of things can you do and look for to make it have good enough energy to warrant being that long. So circling back around now that Julia's back, is that the question of what makes a great episode, like what do you, especially doing like an hour-long conversation, how do you make sure that it is a good episode? What sort of things do you look for in a great episode? And like insofar as they can be repeatable, like.
Yeah. So what you're saying, like when we're doing our podcast, not like when I'm listening to one or whatever.
Well, we can go with both. I think that there's things that like, because what you listen to and enjoy probably influences what you aim for in your own episodes, right?
So, yeah, I think so. So I'll start with ours. Like, I know when it just feels fun. We'll get more specific, but when it feels fun, that is when I know like, okay, this is great. That's when there's a good balance of like us being able to like play off of each other and giving good like content, like we're aware of like the news or whatever. Often it's when we have opinions on things. Sometimes I notice like, oh my God, I couldn't be more boring. When I don't have an opinion on something or I don't know how I feel about a certain thing. I think for ours specifically, when we're talking about like news or like, not a lot of people follow, especially improvisers. There's not huge overlap in like big sports fans and improvisers. I prove me wrong, but there's some, but not a huge overlap. So when we're talking about something that like people probably aren't going to know a bunch about, if we're talking about, you know, Chelsea Gray is moving from one team to another team starting tomorrow, people are going to be like, who's Chelsea Gray? Why is this important? Whatever. We need to be the ones to communicate, one, what's the relevant info that they need to know why this is important? And two, how do we feel about it? Because at the end of the day, that's why people are listening to it. Again, they're not listening to it because they need to know that Chelsea Gray is getting, you know, free agented from one team to another. They're listening to it like, to what's they want to support women's sports maybe, and then also like understand a take on it or whatever. So I think it's when we know how we feel. Everything is improv, you guys. When you know how you feel about something, decide how you feel about something. If I'm often, I don't know, maybe I don't even know how I feel about Chelsea Gray moving teams. But if I just have a take, if I'm pissed about it, if I just decide I'm pissed or whatever, and, you know, justify it in some way, that's improv. That's just straight up improv. I think when you are listening to people be passionate, you are enjoying it.
Yeah.
I think that's true for us. And when we're engaged and we are like, you know, and we have that energy, then I think it is automatically fun.
Yeah, I agree, and I think that it is kind of tough not to boil it down to just like the same again, and exactly what Julia said is the same things that make improv great, which is like being present and being being energized. I think that like we said earlier, and maybe I think about things in more pessimistic terms, but like more so than what makes a great episode. I know that like an episode gets kind of rough if I get in my head and sort of lose that consciousness of being in a engaged conversation for an audience. And it's kind of a balance between like keeping the intimacy of the presence of the conversation, but also keeping the performative energy. In fact, I'll even say a little thing that helps with that right now is the fact that we're not using that external microphone, and the laptop is like across from us on the bed, and so it's making me project more. And so my energy is up a little bit more.
Yeah, that is something with podcasting. I never know how loud to be. I'm automatically so loud, and it's like weird for me to be like, okay, I guess am I just supposed to talk like this now, or what? That feels weird to me.
Yeah, but I think that is how I gauge it. Is like, was I present and sincerely engaged and energized the whole time? And I will try to do those little things for myself that keep myself energized. Just taking a breath, looking at the camera or the person that I'm talking to, depending on if it's in person or not.
Yeah.
And that helps me be present. Is locking eyes with the person or the camera or the audience.
Yeah. And Luke asked a good question. Do you find that having video feedback helps while recording, which is sort of kind of related to what we're talking about? I do, definitely. I think that seeing Mary Beth and Katie, it feels like we're in a room together, sort of. And I can play off of them. Here's where I think like some people may say that it is less helpful. If you are getting distracted by it, if you're someone, which is also me, who keeps being like, is this what I look like? And you're not, staying engaged on the conversation, then maybe that's like distracting and people will notice that like, oh, you're not present or whatever. So if that's a distraction, then maybe don't. However, I think
the feedback is helpful, but not being conscious of the feedback that you might get while you're recording. Is that what you're saying?
Oh, wait.
Having the feedback.
Oh, maybe I misread the question. I read that as...
I figured Luke was talking about having feedback on either videos that you post in comments, but I'm...
No, okay. I think he's asking, is it helpful? Because it was back when we were talking about, like, how do you record? Do you record, on Zoom? Or do you record, like, in mics in the same room? Or do you record only audio on, like, Clean Feed?
Well, Luke,
I could be wrong.
If you're still on with us... help us out. What do you mean by feedback? Do you mean people like public comments?
Hell yeah!
Oh. So when video from the other people.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what I'm talking about. All
right. Luke says Julia's right and James is wrong explicitly. There's no.
Yeah, don't try and spin this. James.
No confusion to be had. No bending it. But okay, so then elaborate for me. You're saying that like feedback, like seeing other people that you're connected with.
Yes.
Okay, so I'm gonna say for me it doesn't help personally because I don't find it distracting or helpful. I think that it's I basically like kind of understand that people can't see each other, so I'm always just kind of like aware that like. it doesn't, whatever's happening doesn't really mean as much as you think it might. Like,
okay,
people could be looking at themselves. People could be looking off camera. It's like, I think I would much rather have the video for remote stuff. But it doesn't make a difference to me. Like what am I trying to say? Like, it's not more helpful or it doesn't do the same thing at all for me for being in person. And like if we're recording in a room, but we're not recording the video, it's I'm still thinking about it as like an audio only thing. And I think about it the same way when I'm recording video. It doesn't really help as much. I don't know. The video interaction doesn't play a big role in it for me.
see, for me, it's everything. I feel like I'm a very body language person. I look at other people's. If someone else is talking, I'm like, whatever. I can't not. And if I'm just like on the phone, I think about it like I'd rather FaceTime someone than be on the phone with them, just because I think things get lost on the phone. I know being on a phone and being on a podcast is way different, but I think that like I lose. I think I lose things if I don't see people. But that's me. I think it's different for everyone. And Luke says it's a very COVID era question, but James mentioned like if you're remote, like me, Katie, and Mary Beth, then it's relevant for any time. Like you have to figure out how you're gonna, keep the energy going or like the connection with people when you are, states apart. Yeah.
So it definitely is more relevant in the COVID area and probably going to stay relevant for afterward. Luke also says when he records in person, he closes his eyes because he hates seeing people.
Yeah, and I
That's
also
fair.
Close my ears. I don't like to listen to people. I just like on a podcast like to say my thing and hope that people respond.
Yeah, but yeah, I do think that the video remote connection is going to stay with or without COVID to some degree for a while.
Yeah.
So it's good to talk about and think about whether or not how you can use it to your advantage and whether or not it does help you. So it's, you can kind of decide whether or not to make use of it when you don't necessarily need to anymore.
Uh-huh.
So we're coming up on 2:00, but I do want to talk about just a couple more things we talked a lot about relating podcasting to improv and which I think is really fun and useful. I think that just to kind of cover all the podcast ground, we should also talk about the kind of technical sides and the marketing sides.
Yeah,
again, that you might not think about if you're considering podcasting and how we've managed / put up with those and just give a little insight into that. So Julia, tell us a little bit about I'll start by saying that when we started doing Buck 50 Social Club, Mike and I partnered to start that up and do the logistical side of or technical side of stuff. I knew I was going to do the editing, and my request of Mike was that he handle all the RSS feed stuff because I knew that it was a pain in the ass. So he was nice enough to do that for us, and Bob is nice enough to do it for this podcast through Gabber Media. So I have not had to deal with like uploading the actual podcast feed and getting it distributed out to podcasting platforms. In your first time doing it was with She's Good. What has that been like for you getting that off the ground?
The technical aspect is for me. It's always harder than it sounds at the beginning. So it was hard. It was very hard. I don't think it's going to be hard for everybody, but
let me frame it real quick because like it's still confusing to me what exactly happens, what you need in order to get it out there. But generally, and this is my understanding because really I begged Mike not to ever bother me with it, and he has been a great partner in that. And my understanding of what is needed is that like you have to host the audio somewhere. And so you need to upload it to some kind of page. And then there's what's called an RSS feed, which is web code language that basically just links your the content that you upload. And it could be, that an RSS feed works for a podcast, a blog, and I think video feeds.
Okay.
You can use it, but it's coding to link your content to end up other places. So that's what it is. But talk me through like how you actually had to get it set up and how much of a pain it is.
Let me just say that like whatever I do right now, I know what I do. I know what I have to do to get the podcast from our mouths to people's ears. I know what I have to do now, but I don't know why, and I don't know what any of it means. So basically, I'll walk you through the sound. It's on Zoom. I download it from Zoom and goes to my computer. Now I have an MP4 file with some video. I take that MP4 video file, put it in Final Cut, edit it, put our little music on it, put our outro on it, do the audio editing, which James taught me. Still,
and you're
understand it.
You're talking about getting it to steady levels, not
steady levels.
There's editing to make cuts, remove stuff,
yep,
and add the music. That's
yes.
One part of editing. The other part is mostly EQ, compression, and limiting, which are going to kind of squeeze the audio to make it a consistent level and at the right volume to be like standard to what you hear on everybody else's audio, so that everyone is kind of like working toward a somewhat, quote unquote, universal volume level, regardless of what level you recorded it at.
So if you've ever listened to a podcast, sometimes like the like ads are going to be so loud, and then you go back to the podcast and it's like you have it all turned up to the entire volume, but you still can't really hear it. It's like that kind of stuff, like making it all make sense. And then you listen to one podcast and it's like, okay, normal. And then you listen to a different, it's all that stuff. Yes. So anyway, you edit it to make it sound like a podcast is supposed to sound. And so that when people laugh, your eardrums don't fall out.
Yes.
So
your eardrums.
So then, okay, it's edited. It's ready to be a podcast. You export it from Final Cut. For a lot of people, it's going to be Logic. I also do it. I also get it. I export it as a movie, YouTube. Then I take that movie that I've just edited, put it in Logic, only take the audio from it. Now I have an audio file. That's going to be my actual podcast you might listen to. Then I export it on Logic. That MP3 file now, okay, I go to Amazon Web Services. Now that's the host thing. Your RSS feed, I don't think, is even part of that as yet. No, it's not. It's only the Amazon. Now, not every podcast has to do this, but you need somewhere to host your podcast, like the files. Okay. Okay. Luke. Catch my new book, everybody. It's coming out mid-November of 2025. It is called So You Have an MP3. What Now? By Julia Schroeder. Now I have to learn what an MP3 is. Thank you, Luke. Okay, but so I'm hosting, so it like lives, it's sort of like your Google Drive. But Google Drive is not enough to hold these long ass episodes. Anyway, so it's on in this Amazon thing. Now I have a link now. Now that Amazon changes it into a link URL. Now I go to Squarespace. Make a website, they say. Great. Okay, we have a website. Now that's where my RSS feed is. Is it? I don't have no idea. Yes, it is. It is because so now I take that URL. Now I take that URL that Amazon gave me. I copy and paste that right into my Squarespace. Okay, so I write out.
Can't possibly be helpful.
So now I write the episode description. I write what the title of the episode is in Squarespace. Now I publish it, and now the podcast goes to Apple and Spotify and wherever it is.
Yeah, wow, it's a lot of work. The truth is, I honestly
talk to Mike Magyar. He will be able to help you through it.
I lost track of whether I lost track of the path that you were laying out, and I really just it's so confusing to me, and I don't know whether or not you are correct in the details, or whether I can help clarify or
no, you said you never want to know about it, so I said I'd be the expert today.
I checked out.
So in 2027, you can look for this one.
Yeah.
Naive you were. Well, no.
But one thing I will say is that it's really helpful that the more popular podcasts become, the more popular remote recording and the virtual stuff becomes, that there's more and more podcast networks. Like, so we use Gabber Media, and Mike and I set up our podcast thing, and Julia did hers like independently. That's probably a lot more work than we need to do if we had found a network first. Once we had everything we needed set up, then we moved to Gabber Media, and run by Matt Nas, another Detroit improv scene friend. And then that helps a lot. And if we had started with nothing and we were like, Matt, hey, can we put up this? This is our podcast. We're planning to start recording it soon. What do we need? Matt is somebody that would be able to help us out. And I'm sure that there's a Matt in more cities than you might think, because podcast networks are, I think, still up and coming, but they're popping up a lot of different places. So I think looking for a podcast network, if all that was just like, what a nightmare, I agree with you, first of all. And secondly, if I were going to start one today without having any infrastructure set up, I would go looking for a podcast network somewhere in my circle, or one that just takes new applicants or whatnot. And I would even say that it's worth paying like a $10 a month. I don't know.
Yeah, like Pinecast, I think. So She's Good is now part of Planet Ant Podcast Network. I still have to do all that, but I think if I were to use Pinecast, it takes away a lot of that. Like, you don't have to, I know a good deal. As I just told you, I am an expert. But if you're not, I think Pinecast will fill in some of those gaps for you. Things like that. There are now like, if there's not a human, I say go to the human, but if you don't have a human that can like tell you all these things or be the one to like help you with it, or a network, then I think there are some online resources too.
Yeah, and more often than not, it's going to cost you some kind, probably $5 to $15 a month.
That was my problem. I wanted it to be totally free.
Yeah, whether you're doing it on a service network, finding somebody to do all the infrastructure for you, or you're having your own host and website to support the feed. Those are going to cost money in some way, shape, or form. And there is a way to do it for free. And it sounds a lot like what Julia has described. Yeah. So if you were like, I think I follow or I know much more than you do, then there's a way to do it for free. And I'm sure you'll nail it.
God freaking speed. And but if you're like me, who knows, let's be honest, literally nothing, it's going to take a lot of time. Time is not free.
Yeah. Yeah, time is money, baby. Luke also said that he has hosted a podcast from Dropbox, which I imagine if you have a larger capacity for data on Dropbox or maybe even Drive, that's awesome and good to know that that's an option. How to cross the finish line from there? Time will tell. Okay, last little bit before we wrap up here is the marketing end of things. And just to give you a quick summary of what's involved, more so than how to do it or advice on it or anything like that. Right. Marketing, what else have you learned about like the extra things that you don't think about at the outset that are needed for like copy and publishing and promoting and stuff like that?
Yeah, I think podcasts are a little bit interesting to market because when you have like a show, like a live show or a sketch show or whatever, you can get your different like promo photos or whatever. With podcasts, I mean, you're just talking. So to get that audio clips as promo, people do it different ways, but I think like those to me are necessary for promo, and to find the right clips where like people are going to understand the context or it's going to give them a good sense of what the show is can be a little bit hard. And just know that like for an hour episode, if I'm the one editing and Mary Beth is the one having to choose a clip, we might you might have to listen to your full episode back and listen closely. Which is why people who do professional podcasts have engineers to help them with this stuff.
Yeah. Well, it helps a little bit since like everyone was there like during the recording, so you can kind of like
Yeah, true.
I guess if you get into a rhythm of it, like kind of thinking about it to make notes as you're going or shortly after might be helpful.
Yeah. Do your stuff immediately after the podcast. I know we said we weren't going to do advice, more like this is what goes into it, but advice is like, don't wait. Do your stuff immediately after.
Yeah, and then like when I was doing like really, really detailed edits on Buck 50, and while I was doing that, I'd be doing individual editing for each person's track. And there's 5 of us in the core group, and sometimes we'd have a 6th person as a guest. I would be doing individual edits on everybody's thing. So I'm kind of like listening to what people are saying in different contexts. And then while I'm doing that and just making the technical audio edits, I'm also listening for like the good sound bites. And if we have a guest, then I'm looking for, again, we said we weren't going to do advice, but this is my advice. Be kind of multitasking if you can, so that you can at the same time make your edits as you are flagging promo pieces.
Mm-hmm.
And when you have a guest I would look to like represent the whole group in like a 30-second to 60-second promo clip. And so you can learn to kind of read waveform. So when you're in a editing software,
I don't do this, but yes,
you can see the wave graphics in your files. And so if someone's not speaking, there's a flat line. And then depending on how loud and how long, there's your little like wavy.
So you're saying the different people in your podcast, you can see when people are talking. You're basically
is essentially what I'm pointing to. And then for a guest, I would just look for like the points that they talk, and I would just see what they said and find the best one. First one, best one.
Yep.
I would make that a promo clip for the guest.
All right.
And then we would usually do maybe 3 or 4 little snippets inside of a promo clip. And so then I would be like, okay, that little guest highlight also had Julia and Colin speaking. Mm-hmm. Let me go find another clip from Leah, and then I would look at her track and find somewhere deeper in the conversation where she has like a longer segment, and I'll be like, okay, what's her thread here? And then I would find something from Mike and so forth. And if you can do that while editing, you're in a really great spot. Is to just kind of like flag things and keep an eye out.
Yep. The last thing I'll say on this is like that there's social media marketing. There's also like the how are you titling your episode? How are you describing your episode in the thing? What are you tagging it with anything? Blah blah blah. There are people who know more about this, but I have started like tried to like do a better job of in the description, not just try to be like freaking sarcastic and funny, but actually like say some keywords that either might pull people in, get the right balance. Like you don't want it to be like only like these girls do this and that, and then this is what happens. Like keep your personality in there, but I would always try to like do jokes, especially with the titles too. If there's something in there that somebody can search for, if they're looking for Chelsea Gray switching teams. I don't know why this keeps being my example, but it can be funny, but like somebody who's like searching that might come across that if you like put that in your title or whatever.
Yeah. So maybe we can kind of sum it up this way for just your short list of things that you might include in marketing of your podcast is the copy that goes along with your description and each of your episodes and titling and tagging for like SEO and searchability.
Yeah.
And then also looking for additional media / clips and images. And so I'll say promo clips would be like separate from thumbnails for every episode of Serious Gear and our pre-recorded episodes of Improv FAQ. I would make a thumbnail, and you have to make a separate thumbnail for YouTube and Facebook, different from if you're putting anything on TikTok and Instagram, because those are vertical versus horizontal. And so like that can take a long time too, is like same thing, because you're looking for like what's a really engaging screenshot of the episode itself, or like a headshot, and how can I do a quick collage of our guest and our topics, and then edit those. So you might end up even having to learn like some kind of simple image editing software, and then there's also things like captions, like. So, and end of the day, there's a lot you can do for marketing. Most of it has to do with making your promo images and clips stand out, and then making your copy, which includes things like transcripts, as searchable and work to your benefit as possible. And you can do as much of that as you want. Again, depending on how committed you are to having this be your primary thing and making the podcast build an audience as quickly and successfully as possible. And you don't have to do most of that stuff. Like you do have to name your episodes, but also Facebook and YouTube have like automatic transcripts, and they're like 90% accurate. And then they also have automatic thumbnail suggestions. And they actually are getting pretty good at finding animated screenshots of the episode. Yes,
that is very true. That is very true.
Some of it has automatic assistant stuff, but it's just something to consider as if you're looking to start up and wondering what's involved.
Yeah.
Great. So we have gone a good hour and 15 minutes, and I hope that we were entertaining and engaging enough to warrant that length. Luke, one thing I got to come back to, I forgot to put this on screen, but Luke said when we were talking about RSS feeds, he said, it's like learning a language new. You make this specific set of sounds and they give you a potato and a beer. That's exactly what the idea of an RSS feed is to me, is that like there's a code involved, and you just learn what you got to learn to get your potato and beer. Like
totally.
It doesn't matter if you understand it, but it's got to be, there's a whole language to it, and you're going to have to learn to make it.
And it will feel arbitrary until you attach meaning to it.
Great. Okay, so thank you so much, Luke. Miss you. Hope to see you in person sometime soon. We should also, I'd love to have you on here, Luke. So maybe I'll reach out to you soon to chat and maybe pick your brain about a topic of your choice in a future episode.
So fun. And anybody listening to this, Luke, and anyone else, whether you're listening to this later or whatever, plug your podcast in the comments.
Yeah. Plug your podcast in the comments, especially if you have episodes that you want to highlight as like for whatever reason, editing, marketing.
One that was specifically bad.
Well, a super bad one where you're like, don't drop the ball like this. And Chris tuned in with us. Thanks for tuning in. Mel, great to hear from you. Heather, thanks for letting us know you can hear us. And that's it for this episode. Is there anything else you wanted to plug before we part?
Plug! Help. I don't know. Well, since we were talking so much about podcasts, follow She's Good, the podcast, in any way you can. We're at She's Good Podcast on Instagram and at She's Good Pod on Twitter. Yep. Find us, and then also subscribe and stuff. We're not the best at marketing, so take my advice with a grain of salt. Actually, Mary Beth and Katie are good at it. We just... Anyway, Do that. My name is Julia Schroeder.
Yes, and my name is James, and you've been watching or listening to the Improv Network podcast on Facebook and YouTube and anywhere else you find podcast audio. You can check out the improvnetwork.org for additional content, resources from the wonderful organization, the Improv Network, festival submissions, blogs, and a whole brand new Improv FAQ page brought to you by myself and Bob, which includes this podcast as well as mini lectures on topics of improv. So that's it. Thanks again. We'll catch you Sundays streaming at 1 p.m. Eastern. Portland, Oregon.
Oregon.
We'll catch you streaming at 1 p.m. Portland Eastern time. All right. And I left the studio instead of ending the broadcast. So bye, everybody.